She had warned him before rules were rules, even if they didn't always make sense. From that moment, the evening began to unravel. The Arizona sun hung low over Stonehaven Estates, casting long amber shadows across rows of pristine houses. The gates hummed softly, opening and closing as residents drove through with their key cards, a rhythm that spelled order, control, and quiet routine. But that calm never lasted long when Janice was on patrol. She stood by the guardhouse, clipboard in hand, lips pursed in practiced disapproval as she watched a dark sedan approach. The driver rolled down his window and flashed a polite smile. His name was Morris Dunley, and he lived here for months. But tonight, that didn't matter. Janice's eyes narrowed. Gate card, please. Morris held it up between two fingers. Didn't scan this time. Might be a system issue. Her expression stiffened. Or maybe you're not using it correctly. Behind him, another car waited. The air hung thick with tension. Morris stayed calm. Voice even, you can check the resident list. Unit 24 bit. But Janice wasn't listening. Rules were rules, and she had warned the HOA about people slipping through. In her mind, every exception risked chaos. She pulled out her phone. If you can't verify your entry, I'll have to call the police. Morris blinked, caught between disbelief and restraint. You're calling 911. Because my gate card didn't scan. Her thumb hovered over the dial. For safety reasons, yes. We've had break-ins before. The lie came easily because Janice believed her authority was protection. And protection justified everything. Within minutes, the flashing blue lights of a patrol car broke the desert calm. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Children paused their bikes. The familiar hum of Stonehaven Estates turned into a quiet, collective breath of disbelief. Morris stepped back, hands visible, tone steady. Officers, I live here. My address is right on the lease. You can check it. One of the officers glanced at Janice, confusion flickering across his face. Ma'am, is there an actual threat here? Janice's voice faltered for the first time. He wouldn't identify himself. He looked suspicious. Morris met the officer's gaze, weary but composed. Suspicious for what? Trying to get home. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the pretense of order she had built around herself. A few houses away, Tanya Dunley sat in the dispatch center, headset tight against her ear. She had answered the 911 call. Janice's voice, trembling. Urgent. There's a man refusing to leave the gated entrance, she'd said. Tanya hadn't realized, at first, that the caller was talking about her own husband. Now, as her colleagues whispered across the room, she stared at the live feed on her screen. The patrol unit had already arrived. Her training told her to stay neutral, but her heart was a storm. The call log flashed. Incident resolved, no threat found. But Tanya knew better. Incidents like these didn't end when the lights faded. They lingered, like echoes in polite hallways. That night, Morris came home quiet. Their daughter was asleep, unaware. He hung his keys, loosened his tie, and sank into the couch. Tanya sat beside him, fingers brushing his arm. She really called the police? She asked softly. He nodded. Because I didn't swipe a plastic card fast enough. Anger simmered beneath her calm. She wanted to scream, but all she could do was listen. Morris's strength wasn't in confrontation. It was in composure. I had to remind myself, he said quietly, losing my temper only makes me fit her story. Tanya looked at him, pride and pain mixing in her chest. You don't have to keep proving who you are, Maurice. He gave a faint, weary smile. Maybe not to you, but to people like her. Always. Outside, the desert wind brushed against the closed blinds. Somewhere, a phone camera had caught everything: the flashing lights, Janice's tone, Morris's calm. The night wasn't over. It was just beginning to ripple outward, toward screens, comments, and consequences neither of them could yet imagine. The next morning, the neighborhood was unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before a storm of whispers. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. And by mid-morning, the video was everywhere. The first clip showed Janice standing at the gate, voice sharp and accusing. Her words, "He doesn't belong here," rang louder than the sound of crickets in the background. The second clip caught Morris calm as ever, holding out his ID while blue and red lights flashed against his car. By the time the third video hit social media, Stonehaven Estates had turned into a digital battlefield. Comments poured in. This is what power trips look like. Man kept his cool better than I ever could. She really called 911 over a gate card. Morris sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through the storm. His coffee had gone cold. Forgotten? Tanya sat across from him, eyes on his face, not the screen. This is going to spread, she said quietly. People are going to find out sooner rather than later. Morris sighed, his thumb hovering over the scrolling feed. Maybe that's the point, he said finally. Maybe people need to see it. Outside, a delivery truck drove by, the world carrying on as if nothing had changed. But for the man, for Janice, nothing would ever be the same again. By noon, an emergency HOA group chat was on fire. Screenshots of the video circulated faster than Janice could respond. You need to resign. This behavior doesn't represent us. This is a disgrace. Janice typed furiously in reply. You're taking this out of context. I was protecting the neighborhood. But context had already vanished, swallowed whole by video evidence and public opinion. Her words meant little now. The truth had already spoken, frame by frame. Across town at the dispatch center, Tanya watched as the story climbed local trending pages. Her colleagues whispered in the background, unaware that the voice in the viral 911 call belonged to her. She didn't speak up. She didn't need to. Sometimes, truth doesn't need a defender, it just needs to be seen. Meanwhile, Janice sat in her car, outside the clubhouse, staring at her phone. Messages kept coming. Neighbors, board members, even local reporters. Each one chipped away at the fortress of authority she had built over the years. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through comments. She's exactly why people hate HOAs. Power hungry. That poor man handled it with more grace than she ever could. She slammed her phone down, fury flashing across her face. They didn't understand. She wasn't the villain here. She was enforcing rules, keeping order. That's what she told herself, even as the evidence said otherwise. At home, Morris tried to return to normalcy. Their daughter sat on the floor, coloring, humming softly. He smiled faintly at her. Her world was still innocent, untouched by all this. Tanya leaned against the counter, watching them. You know this isn't going to die down anytime soon, she said gently. Maurice gave a small, tired nod. Then we let it run its course. I won't hide. The day stretched long. Every hour brought new posts, new opinions, new headlines. By evening, the HOA president, Gerald Miles, sent Janice a short, cold email. Janice, until this situation settles, you are advised to step down temporarily. The videos are damaging to all of us. She slammed her laptop shut. Step down. I didn't do anything wrong, she shouted into the empty room. But deep down, she felt the shift, the sudden isolation of someone who had lost control of her own narrative. That night, the HOA clubhouse buzzed with murmurs. A few board members lingered after hours, reviewing statements. When Janice walked in, heads turned. Gerald looked up, expression grim. Janice, this isn't the time. She ignored him, voice tight with anger. We can't let social media decide the truth. That video was manipulated. Elaine, another board member, leaned forward, calm but firm. We all saw it. Janice, it's not about editing. It's about what actually happened. Janice's voice cracked, desperation replacing pride. So you're all just going to abandon me? After everything I've done for this place? Gerald closed his folder, tone weary. You've done good work before, yes? But this was reckless. You called 911 over a gate card. Janice, that's not leadership. That's fear. Her throat tightened. The room spun slightly. He made me feel powerless, she whispered. Elaine shook her head slowly. No, Janice, he didn't make you feel powerless. You made yourself powerless because you refused to see him as an equal. The silence that followed was brutal. Janice turned away before anyone could see her eyes fill with tears. When she left the clubhouse, the desert night felt colder than usual. The glow from streetlights blurred in her vision. Everything she'd built, every ounce of authority, was slipping away. Back home, she sat in darkness, the only light coming from her buzzing phone. News outlets had begun reporting the story. The headline was everywhere. HOA board member calls 911 on resident at Stonehaven Estates. She scrolled through the endless stream of comments until the words blurred together. Each one struck like a tiny hammer against her pride. And while Janice crumbled under the weight of exposure, Morris's home was filled with something else: quiet resilience. He and Tanya tucked their daughter into bed, then sat together in the dim glow of the living room. Maybe this will change things, Tanya said softly. Maybe people will finally see what we lived through. Morris looked toward the window, where the faint reflection of flashing lights from someone's phone still danced across the glass. Maybe, he said, but even if they don't, at least the truth is out there. She wanted to pick up her phone and call Janice directly to tell her exactly what she had done. By noon, Tanya's phone buzzed, her personal one this time. It was a text from her neighbor, Deshawn. Hey, saw some stuff going around the community page. You okay? Tanya's chest tightened. She hadn't even checked yet. She opened Facebook and searched Stonehaven Estates Residence Group. There, it was gate incident last night, safety reminder. Posted by none other than Janice Weaver. Last night I had to call the police on a man attempting to enter our community without authorization. Thankfully, law enforcement responded quickly. This is a reminder to all residents to stay alert and report any suspicious activity immediately. Tanya's stomach turned. There was no mention of the truth. No mention that the man was a resident, her husband, the same man who shoveled snow from the sidewalks last winter and helped repair the broken park bench by the playground. The comments section was already alive. Good job, Janice. We need more people like you keeping this place safe. This is why HOA rules matter. But then a few others began to trickle in, people who knew. Wait, isn't Morris a resident? Pretty sure he lives here. I've seen him jogging in the mornings. Y'all might want to check your facts before praising this. Morris read the post later that evening, his jaw tight. She really went online and made herself the hero. Tanya nodded, her voice low. That's how people rewrite stories. They post first, edit later. He looked at her, and you know what the problem is. By the time truth catches up, the lie's already viral. The following days in Stonehaven Estates were strange. Neighbors waved less. Conversations stopped when the Dunleys walked by, and some avoided eye contact altogether. Others, though, offered quiet support, a nod, a glance that said, "We saw what happened. We know," but silence has its own kind of weight. One evening, Morris stepped outside to take the trash out. As he wheeled the bin to the curb, he noticed a car slowing down. It was Janice's SUV. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. She didn't wave, didn't roll down the window, just stared. Her jaw set tight. Before driving off, it wasn't guilt in her expression. It was something more dangerous. Pride trying to survive the truth. Later that night, Tanya and Morris sat on the couch, the TV playing quietly in the background. Tanya leaned her head on his shoulder. "You think she ever admit she was wrong?" she asked softly. Morris chuckled, bitterly. "People don't admit they're wrong. The world just shows them." As if on cue, Tanya's phone buzzed again, a notification from the same community page. Someone had uploaded a short video clip. The title read, "HOA board member calls cops on resident at gate." The video was grainy, filmed from across the street. But it was clear enough. Janice's voice echoed through the speaker. "People like him don't belong here." Then, Morris's calm voice, "Ma'am, I live here." The comments section exploded. "Wow, that's disgusting. So he really was a resident." Imagine being that calm after being treated like a criminal. Tanya's hands trembled as she read the replies. It was spreading finally, the truth. By the next morning, more videos appeared. Another angle showed the officer confirming Maurice's address. Another caught Janice gesturing angrily toward the gate. Each one a new piece of evidence dismantling her story. For the first time since that night, Tanya felt something close to relief. The truth was out, not because of an official report, but because people had recorded what really happened. Maurice, on the other hand, felt mixed emotions. Vindication wasn't victory, it was exposure. Now, strangers across the neighborhood, maybe even beyond, would watch him relive the moment. The night air over Stonehaven Estates was unnervingly still, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Streetlights flickered faintly against the trimmed lawns and white fences, the perfect illusion of peace. Inside her car, Tanya sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the house across the street. The curtains in Janice's living room moved ever so slightly, a hand pulling them back, just enough to peek out. Tanya's pulse quickened. Was Janice watching her too? She gripped the steering wheel tightly, forcing her mind to stay calm. But calm wasn't coming easily tonight. She replayed every word of the last call, every second of the silence that followed. That silence still screamed louder than anything. It was the same silence she'd heard on the dispatch line, the same pause before the voice of a woman broke through. "Please, someone help me." Now Tanya knew who that voice belonged to, and the weight of that realization had been slowly crushing her ever since. 2 days had passed since the confrontation, and the department had gone quiet about it. Officially, there was no evidence against Janice's husband, no charges, no statement, no closure, just whispers, the kind that travel faster than truth ever does. But Tanya couldn't let it go. Not after what she'd heard, not after what she'd felt. She pulled out her phone and opened the recording again. That one call, that single, desperate plea, "Help me." Every time she pressed play, it sounded fainter, as if the voice itself was fading from existence. Erased by procedure and protocol. But Tanya wouldn't let that happen. Not this time. She turned off the engine and stepped out into the cold night air. Her shoes crunched against the gravel as she crossed the street. Each step felt heavier, as if the darkness itself was pushing her back. She stopped at the edge of Janice's driveway, her breath fogging in the cool air. She could see movement inside, a shadow passing across the window, and then, the sound of a door unlatching. "Tanya." Janice's voice was soft, trembling not with fear, this time, but something closer to resignation. "I knew you'd come." Tanya froze. "You knew?" Janice nodded slowly, stepping into the porch light. Her eyes were tired, the kind of tired that no sleep could fix. "Because I would have done the same thing," she whispered. "If I were in your place." For a moment, neither woman spoke. The silence between them wasn't hostile now. It was heavy with understanding. Two people on opposite sides of the same wound. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lavender and bleach. Too clean, too controlled. Tanya glanced around, framed photos of a perfect family, perfectly arranged. No trace of chaos, no hint of what had really happened here. Janice moved toward the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of water. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed one to Tanya. "You know, everyone keeps saying I should move on," Janice began, her voice distant. "That I should forgive, that it was an accident." She looked up, eyes shimmering under the dull light. "But you can't forgive something that still happens every night in your head." Tanya didn't respond. She just listened. Every word felt like it was carving itself into her chest. "I didn't want to ruin his life," Janice continued, "but I wanted him to feel something. Just once. To know what it's like to be scared." Her voice broke slightly. so I called that night. I wanted someone, anyone, to hear me, but I never thought it would be you." Tanya's throat tightened. "You called the station, knowing I might be there." Janice shook her head. "No, I didn't know it would be you. I just knew that if I didn't call, I'd disappear, and he'd keep pretending nothing ever happened." For a moment, time froze. The world outside seemed to fade, just the two of them, trapped between guilt and truth. Tanya finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Janice, you don't have to face this alone." Janice looked up, her expression unreadable. "But I already am," she said softly, "because every time I tell the truth, it becomes someone else's rumor." The words cut deep. Tanya knew exactly what she meant. The system they both trusted had ways of burying what didn't fit. Paperwork, silence, denial. But Tanya had something they didn't. The recording, the proof. She reached into her jacket pocket and placed a small flash drive on the table. "This has everything," she said quietly. "The call logs, timestamps, your voice unedited." Janice's eyes widened. "You kept it." "I had to," Tanya replied, "because one day, someone will ask again what happened here. And when they do, I'll tell them the truth." Janice's lip quivered. "You could lose your job for that." "I already lost my peace," Tanya said. "So what difference does it make?" The two women sat there for a long time, not as dispatcher and victim, but as survivors of the same broken system. Hours later, when Tanya finally stepped out of the house, the sky was starting to lighten. A pale dawn spread across Stonehaven Estates, washing the neighborhood in muted gold. For the first time in weeks, Tanya felt something she hadn't dared to feel: relief. Not because everything was fixed, but because, finally, someone knew the truth besides her. As she got into her car, she glanced once more at Janice's window. The curtain fluttered again, a faint wave, or maybe just the morning breeze. Either way, it felt like a goodbye. 3 months later, the department held a review. Someone had leaked the recording. The story made the rounds, first among officers, then local news, and eventually across state lines. Janice's husband resigned from his position quietly, citing personal reasons. No arrest, no trial. But, for the first time, people started whispering a different version of the story. One where Janice wasn't crazy, wasn't unstable, wasn't a liar. And Tanya, she transferred out of dispatch shortly after, moved to a smaller town, a quieter one. She never spoke publicly about what happened, but sometimes, late at night, she'd still hear that voice, faint but clear. "Help me." Only now, it didn't sound like a cry anymore. It sounded like closure. In the end, it wasn't justice that kept Tanya awake at night. It was the silence, the same silence that started it all. Only now, she understood it differently. Silence wasn't always cowardice. Sometimes, it was the sound of someone still fighting quietly, painfully to be heard. And in Stonehaven Estates, where the streets looked peaceful again, that silence finally meant something else. It meant someone had listened.